You are listening to Despair by Michael Brockbank. Episode 12. The hunter turned to see a young woman dragging what seemed to be a small handcart of random things. Some looked valuable, while others seemed less than what she probably thought they were worth. It looked as though she had been busy looting the abandoned village. "If you're looking for something that would fetch copper, there's not much left," she shouted, still dragging the cart behind her. She was a small woman, but demonstrated a great deal of strength due to her cargo. Jordan was sure the leverage of the cart made a difference in her load, though. The leather tunic and trousers she was wearing were nearly falling off as they were much too big. Each was fastened tightly to her body by strips of what looked like cloth and aging leather. Her blonde hair was matted with dirt and fresh mud, probably from slipping and falling through the soft nearby landscape. A great deal of water fell the night before. "Do you know what happened here?" Jordan asked, taking a few steps toward the young thief. She immediately dropped the handle of the cart, withdrew a dagger from her waist, and pointed it at him. It was as if she pulled it out of thin air. The contents of the cart shifted loudly as the handle hit the muddy ground. "Take another step, and I'll slit your throat," she yelled with a calm demeanor. The hunter found it curious that such a small mouse of a woman had such gall and apparent bravery. Jordan stopped his approach and held his hands out to either side to show he wasn't wielding a weapon of his own. "I have no quarrel with you, little one. I was simply asking if you knew what happened here." "It's not my size you should fear, sir." She lowered the weapon to her waist, but still pointing at the stranger. "And no, I don't. The village was empty when I got here." Jordan looked around a bit, still hoping some kind of life was stirring in this darkened landscape. He looked back at the young woman and began his trek to the inn. The hunter was hoping she hadn't looted his gear, most of all, his bow. She watched as he walked off. When she realized he was heading for the inn, the next structure on her list of places to loot, she ran up behind him. Hearing the footsteps through the muddy road, Jordan pulled one of the axes from his belt, turned, and pointed his weapon at the woman. She stopped her charge and pointed her dagger in a likewise fashion. "This is my spot. Go find your own," she exclaimed. Jordan could see the worry in her eyes, but couldn't tell if it was because he was holding his own weapon or because he might take something she desperately wanted. "I'm only here to retrieve what is actually mine. The rest of it is yours," he said, replacing the axe onto his belt. He turned and began to walk again towards the inn. The young woman stood for a moment, somewhat confused by the hunter's response. She had thought for sure he was looking for things to take from the abandoned village. Tossing a look back at her cart to make sure no one was taking anything, she put away her own weapon within the concealment of her leathers and began following him. As he made his way across the village square, Jordan kept an eye out for tracks of both people and creatures. Aside from the fresh footfalls of a small petite nature near some of the outlying buildings, there were none. A slight breeze whipping through the nearby trees and buildings were the only sounds that could be heard, aside from the slosh of mud from the young woman behind. Even the animal pens were shut but empty. Whatever it was took every form of life from the village without making a commotion. He was starting to doubt the people had any idea what had happened to them. Jordan pushed the door to the inn open and stepped inside. The air had a musty, damp smell, something he hadn't remembered the first time entering the establishment the day before. Instead of sounds of chatter and dishes clinking together, all was still. On a few of the tables rested plates with food, some half-eaten. Some of the chairs were pulled from the tables as if to suggest someone was sitting in them. Embers were all that were left in the fireplace, possibly the remains of a fire from the night before. Candles had been burnt to their holders, and a single lantern remained lit above the bar with the smallest of flame. Feeling uneasy about the ambience, Jordan pulled an axe from his belt and slowly walked into the room. Not far behind was the young woman entering moments after the hunter. She stopped for a moment as a chill ran across her spine. There was a sinister atmosphere to the inn, as if something dark had walked in and made everyone vanish. Pulling her dagger out from her leathers, she stepped into the room closely behind the hunter. As brave as she was, the young thief felt out of place and in over her head. As she surveyed the room, half believing someone was going to pop out at any moment, the young woman bumped into the hunter, who had stopped walking just short of the staircase leading up to the sleeping rooms. He rolled his eyes and looked back as if to scold her. The abrupt stop startled her, since she had no idea she was that close to the man. She looked up at him and saw he was getting frustrated. "Sorry," she said quietly, stepping back. "What happened?" "I don't know. Whatever it was happened very quickly," he replied, making his way towards the first step of the staircase, axe in hand and ready. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Collecting my things," he replied, keeping with a steady and slow pace. The hunter was trying to listen for any signs of an aggressor, but the little woman was making it difficult. "I don't want to go up there." "Then don't." "I don't want to stay down here by myself." "Then leave." Jordan began making his way carefully up the stairs, the sounds of creaking wood echoing throughout the main room. She looked back at the open doorway. The daylight seemed like a beacon of hope, almost pleading for her to leave the inn. Looking back at the hunter, who was now halfway up the stairs, she made the choice to stick with him. The young woman felt it was probably the safest place to be at the moment. The two made it to the second floor. Doors lined both sides of the hallway, most of which were shut. Jordan began to feel increasingly uneasy. Something was nearby, but he couldn't tell what. Pulling the second axe from his belt, he began to slowly making his way down the hallway. The young woman's heart began to race. This was far more what she anticipated. All she wanted was a few things that might fetch a bit of coin. The dagger she held in her hand gave witness to how bad she began to tremble. Each door Jordan came to, he paused for a brief moment. The hunter couldn't shake the feeling that one of the rooms had an unanticipated guest. The door next to his room was slightly ajar, and he caught a brief glimpse of movement. Pushing the door slowly with one of the axe blades, it swung open to reveal a large man with his back turned, kneeling over a broken chest. The figure had a bulky build and was wearing a long overcoat that showed the passage of time. Slight scorch marks scored half of the coat, which stretched down to his thick boots. The unknown figure slowly stood to his feet and turned his head. The man had a very thick beard from what Jordan could see, similar to the dead he dispatched the day before. But it was the eyes that Jordan noticed most, as they were a blue that he's never seen on a human. "Well, this is unfortunate," the man said in a deep and graveled voice. The figure turned to face the hunter while holding onto an iron mirror with one hair-covered, clawed hand. "For you, anyway." The burly figure dropped the mirror, which caused the glass to shatter on impact.